Hello and welcome everyone to our fourth webinar in this very big series. I hope you are all doing well. It's a big time in aged care. We feel it, we're with you. We know just how much is on your plate at the moment. Just want to send out lots of positive vibes and hope you're all doing well. We really appreciate you joining us today for the fourth webinar in our series to help you get ready for the Strengthen Standards. We are really excited to bring today's topic to you, where we are finally looking at competency assessments. I feel like we've been talking about competency assessments for a little while. We will explore what those new changes are under Action 2.96, but we're going to, of course, in true AusMed style, talk a little bit beyond that. We're going to cover the regulation, but also look at why competency assessments really matter. And I think, jumping straight into it, the key thing is to say what these regulations show is that it's not enough now to just say that someone's trained, that we've ticked that box. We need to show that someone is competent, a degree of confidence as well, and supported to do their job well. So we hope that you enjoy this webinar session today that we've put together for you. It is designed to look at unpacking competency-based education and competency assessments. And as always, we hope to do it in a really practical way. We'll look at what's changing, what those regulations are, how you might be audited, but then we'll also look at, what good looks like, what is best practice, and finally finish up with some examples, some ideas, some tools that you can use straight away tomorrow, next week, this month, to help get you ready for July 1 and beyond. So I'd just like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung and the Gadigal peoples, the traditional custodians on both the lands which we're joining from today. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise their enduring connection to country and our community. So let's do it, right? It is, what's the date today? The 13th of May. Happy International Nurses Day for yesterday to all the nurses. Happy Mother's Day as well to all the mums, the grandmums, the expected mums for Sunday. But our big deadline, as we know, is July 1. It is fast approaching. We understand that everyone is at different stages, but as I said, extending the love. You're not alone. We are all in this together. Feel proud of the work that you're doing right now to really support the care of older people in Australia. Be proud of your contributions. I'm sure you will look back on this time in your careers and recognise it was a busy time, but it was a really meaningful time, and there was a lot of impact that you brought to your organisations and to the care of older people. So pats on the back. Lots of love to you guys. We know the rubber's hitting the road and it is a difficult time. So as always, just a tiny bit of housekeeping. We will endeavour to get the recording for this session out in the next 48 hours or so. And if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to put those in the chat and we will do our best to respond in live time. Here is your dream team, your stellar lineup for today. It is my absolute pleasure, as always, to introduce our presenters. First up, we have Dr. Karen Patterson. Karen is AusMed's inaugural Chief Nursing Officer, and she is leading our clinical governance and workforce capability strategies. With a distinguished career in health leadership, governance and workforce development, Karen brings extensive expertise in clinical excellence, regulatory compliance and professional development across the very diverse healthcare settings that she has worked in. So thank you, Karen, for joining us. We also have our beloved Michelle Wickie, who is our Chief Customer Officer here at AusMed. And Michelle leads a very a growing team, shall we say it, of very dedicated people that are here to provide exceptional customer experience. And do they do that? She has led the design and implementation of a capability framework for a workforce of over 5,000 people. Non-trivial matter, just that. She's passionate about making practical, impactful learning and focuses on making training as effective and accessible as possible. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you, as always, for giving us some time in your very busy calendar. We love having you here. And it is another pleasure to introduce somewhat of a new face. I think you'll certainly get to know this one, Emma Piercy. She's an intensive care nurse and specialises in healthcare education innovation. Just what we need more of here at AusMed, which we absolutely love and are embracing. As the Learning Innovation Lead at AusMed, Emma focuses on maximising the impact and the value of educational content to really look at how that can drive workforce capability. So we are so pleased to have Emma with us here today. And hopefully you know my face by now. My name is Zoe Yule. I'm Head of Community here at AusMed. I lead our provider unit. I'm an ICU nurse. I love education. I won't dwell too much on that, but really, really pleased to be here with you all again today. Moving along, here is our agenda. What we've got for you in the next 55 minutes or so is pretty full, as always. So first up, we will look at Action 2.96. I know that's one of the reasons that you are here today, to understand what that new requirement, understand it to the organisation looks like. As always, though, we try and move beyond ticking that box, but we will show you what that regulation and what that change looks like. We will then move on to, trying to define the essentials. There are a lot of terms within the broad term or concept of competency. So getting clear on things like, what is competency? What's competency-based education? What's assessment? What's verification? There are a few really key points that we'll just cover. I'm then going to hand over to Michelle, who will do, in true Michelle Wiki style, a look at the current state of competency and, dare I say, look at some of the common challenges and pain points of how it is done currently. We'll then move on to Karen. Karen's going to share what best practice in competency assessment looks like. So what's good? How do we get there? And then Emma will bring it home for us by looking at some of the tools, some tips, some templates, which we're really excited to share with you, and resources so that you can take the next step and start working towards implementing a really robust evidence-based competency assessment program within your organisations. So let's get started. All right, here is Action 2.96. I'm sure you've read this many times. I feel like I dream these words sometimes. Action 2.96, as you know, sits under Standard 2, the organisation, and it states that all aged care workers receive competency-based training in relation to core matters. So the core matters are, I think, easy to understand, right? That they are very clearly aligned with where these new standards are going. So we have a core matter being, we need competency-based education on person-centred rights-based care, culturally safe, trauma-aware and healing-informed care, caring for people with dementia, responding to medical emergencies, code of conduct, SIRS, and of course the strengthened standards. I think what's less clear, and this is, commonly seen when we have a new regulation, we have, this is what you need to do, but how you get there and the ways that you make this work for your organisation can vary. So when looking at understanding these requirements, I think this is what we interpret, and we've read through the guidance material, the audit frameworks. We have done a lot of study on this. So what's clear is that what you would need to do, the clear expectation is, one, provide competency-based training on core matters. So that's really clear. But what does that actually mean? It means that we need to show a process and evidence that we are assessing if individuals can actually demonstrate these core skills in real-world situations. As we keep on saying in these webinars, it's not just evidence. You will have heard me say an example or evidence of an effective system or process. So it is not just enough to say, here's our competency assessments, here's our records of paper. Hopefully that will change, but of paper that we've done these competency assessments. It is, what is your system, what is your process that guides this assessment to take place. And of course, that evaluation piece. So looking at how do you track and report on these key outcomes. When you look at the evidence in the in our audit preparation tool, this picture is confirmed. So you might recall from, I think, the previous 1 or 2 webinars, we've looked at triangulation. So what that is how does your evidence link together? So this is looking at 3 key categories where the topic of competency can be audited, and examples of what might be requested. I'll go through these 3 categories and share with you some of these items. But what the key message here is that auditors have already started, and they will most certainly be looking for how your evidence items link together. So they want to see that your documents and records relating to competency assessment fit with what your staff are saying, and which also align with what your management feedback. And this goes right through all the organizations and right through the categories. So consistency and alignment between what you are doing, what your people understand you to be doing, is critical, and people being your staff, but also your board, your governing body. If we look at what might be requested from a documents and records perspective when it comes to competency assessments, some of the items are what is your process for worker qualifications, competency and training? So again, what is the process? That is critical. Remember, this goes to not just your regular workforce, but for agency and subcontractor agreements as well. When we look at management feedback, questions that can be asked of your managers or of yourselves is how to ensure that workers receive competency-based training related to core matters. So again, there is another question about your process, and how do you manage the currency of qualifications, competency, training, and scope of practice of workers. And then when it comes to what might an auditor ask staff is that, how have you received competency training in relation to the core matters? When was the last time? During your performance appraisal, was your assessment of competency spoken about? So the key thing is here, competency matters, and it matters across these evidence categories. And what is underlying, and what is clear is that your underlying process is sound. So we're going to go through a lot about what that underlying process looks like. Thanks for all the questions in the chat, everyone, and I know our team is responding clearly. And I agree, there is a lot of unknown still that we'll try and unpack and get closer to understanding, what good looks like. I mentioned the audit readiness tool. So there is a lot more, particularly around training. I've picked out the items relating to competency, but as you would know, Action 2.96 sits very, very closely in Standard 2, the organisation, amongst Action 2.95, which is all about creating an effective training system. So we can't look at these evidence items in isolation. We need to think of the bigger picture around Standard 2, in particular, the workforce. So if you'd like to explore more of this from an audit readiness perspective, we'll pop the link in the chat. You can request our free audit readiness tool, which has been really, really well received, and we're really glad to hear that this is helping make a difference. So if you haven't got your hands on one, click the link here and we can send one out. It looks at all of the evidence categories, and then within those, the evidence items that could be requested during your first audit under the standards, and helps you assign accountability and responsibility, and then track progress to see how well you're helping to prepare for an assessment and prepare those items. So really critical tool. If you haven't got a copy of it, we can easily send one out to you. So I think, as we always do, it is really important to say that, competency assessments, they're not just a requirement under Action 2.96, although that is a trigger and a reason for us discussing this and being here today. What we'd encourage you to think of when it comes to competency assessments as really a vital tool for building a confident, capable, and to some respect, a compliant workforce. The key points are that when we can deliver competency-based education, within that effective training system, we can actually empower staff. We can reduce risk, and we can support that culture of continuous improvement. So there is a box to tick. Yes, we hear that, but we also need to think of the bigger picture and what those benefits of a really robust competency assessment and framework are. So let's look at some of the benefits. First is that competency assessments, they give us confidence, right? They help our staff feel secure in their roles when they know their competence has been clearly demonstrated and recognised. And that gives me confidence too. It offers verification, which gives us safety. Rather than just assuming, based on qualifications or tenure perhaps, that someone is competent and can do their job, competency assessments have a very clear benefit when done well of actually validating actual performance. So that is critical. Third key benefit is that really we get good governance assurance from competency assessments. They can provide leadership with a very clear evidence-based insights into workforce capabilities. And with that comes accountability, informed decision-making, and better outcomes. So fourth key benefit goes to our staff. It can really support workforce development. If there is an aspect of a competency assessment that is not fulfilled, then that's what can guide and support those meaningful conversations with our staff about skill gaps, about mentoring. They open up professional growth opportunities. And finally, this is where continuous improvement comes in. If we're thinking about this as a system rather than just a checkbox, then the results from those competency assessments can then inform our service planning and our service delivery. They can feed into our annual training needs assessment. They can help us plan what mandatory training items we need, what optional training items we need for which facility, for which job role. They can help drive continuous improvement initiatives. So some really clear benefits of competency assessment when we think about it as a whole rather than just a checkbox. So core message, competency assessments should be viewed as part of the broader training system, not just in relation to Action 2.96. So really encourage you, which I know you do, to think about not just building systems to pass audits. We want strong systems that really do enable our people to provide excellent care every day from July 1 and onwards. This is really important. The work that you're doing now can't just fizzle out. You're putting too much effort into creating good systems, good processes. We want to build these to last. So a great way to summarize this is competency is part of your quality assurance strategy. Get good systems in place. When competency assessments are done well, they're not paperwork, they're proof of practice. We can't see them as an administrative burden. They're a real driver to our quality assurance strategy. So I'm going to swiftly move on to defining a couple of key terms, to looking at the essentials that make up competency assessments before I hand it over to Michelle and Karen. So why I've put some of these terms in is because I think it can be a little bit misleading. We can get a little bit confused at times when we're looking at a really big concept like this, and with that we can sort of undermine our implementation and our outcomes. So I'll just use this section briefly to get some clarity and build that shared language around these terms, and I do so that we're all on the same page. I recognise that there is much experience in our audience and that you bring to this conversation. So I don't mean to, what's the expression? It's not spit eggs, it's lost the suck eggs by saying, this is what it is. But I think it is good to get on the same page and define the basics. So, what is competence? And we've drawn from a lot of sources to try and narrow or boil these concepts down. They might be slightly different to the, your specific policy or working definition that you use. But for the purpose of this webinar, what we've defined competence is as follows. Competence is the overall ability of an individual to perform a job effectively, integrating knowledge, skills, behaviours, and experience to meet or exceed the required standards. That's competence. Competency, on the other hand, is the observable and measurable ability to apply those skills, to apply those knowledge, to apply those behaviours effectively in the specific context. And that's really key here. So in practice, competencies serve as the foundation for three key things. One is assessment, evaluating whether individuals can actually perform the task to the required standard. That's critical. The second is competencies serve as a foundation for development. Identifying that based on this assessment, these are the areas of growth that I need to work with this person to achieve, and maybe training or maybe conversations or coaching or mentoring is how we get there. But they offer a very, very clear moment to look at what development can I support this person with. And the third key thing that competency gives us is quality assurance. So we want to reduce risk. We want to reduce variability. So having a standardized way of assessing competence can give us a more consistent and a more set of safe practices across our workforce. So therefore, if we take competence and competency, when it comes to competency assessment, our working definition is a structured process used to determine if a person is competent. And we know that best practice is very clear that competency assessments must be valid, reliable, role-specific, objective, but also be standardized. So where does that leave competency-based education? There's nothing in any of the guidance material that I can find that says this is our definition of competency-based education from the Commission. I've read the glossary, I've looked at websites. So what we've done is to try and fuse together our evaluation of what this means. Where we've landed is that competency-based education is education with an evaluation or an assessment, whatever language you'd prefer to use, that supports learners to acquire and demonstrate the necessary skills and knowledge to perform effectively in that real world setting, so in the context of their professional working environment. So you've got training or education plus a demonstration component. So just going to highlight those two words: training or education plus demonstration. You've probably all got one of these, just this spreadsheet, get into your head thinking, oh my gosh, if I've got to look at that one more time. A competency framework is another key term to really consider within this set of language. You might refer to it as a competency matrix. So what that is, as I said, a big spreadsheet, a really big spreadsheet probably, that outlines what you determine are the specific competencies required for your various roles within an organization, and that obviously align with your organizational goals and the standards. So really big spreadsheet is probably the best way to say what your competency matrix is. And then there's a couple of words. These are the last two definitions. And this is a really critical one. Someone that talks about verification a lot is Donna Wright, and we'll cover her in a quick video and also when we look at best practice. But verification's a really important concept to really clearly define when it comes to competencies, because that is the process of whereby an assessor confirms that the individual has demonstrated the required competencies through an appropriate method. And Donna Wright, so a real thought leader, an advocate of best practice in competency assessment, shares that there's different types of verification methods about. And like when we're assessing what's the need or what training do I do, we need evidence to validate it so we can match that our training matches our need, which matches the target audience and so forth. The same can be said of competency assessments and your verification. So you have a competency assessment that is hopefully written, it's fair, it's balanced, it has integrity, it's objective, and then we have a method that is used to demonstrate or to verify that that person is competent. So there are different methods of verification available, and we need to have options in terms of how we verify that particular competence. So just to pause, remember, competency is about demonstration. Assessment observes that action. Verification confirms if it's correct. And it's probably important not to confuse everyone, but to say that this is different. Verification is different to validation. So validation would typically happen within the competency assessment development phase, and that's a process that can help show that the assessment can be trusted and is accurate. So I think you've probably heard enough from me to begin with. We've tried to define the key terms, look at what that regulatory change is in brief. That brings us to talking about competency assessments. But I think what it is really important to look at is, where's it falling short? What are some of the challenges and pain points that can bog us down when it comes to competency assessment in the real world? So I am going to hand over to Michelle very briefly. Michelle, she has got this knack, this rare ability to absolutely tell it like it is. No joke. I'm sure you know that by now. In fact, she does that so well, tells it like it is, that Michelle now has her own segment in our brand new podcast, The Capability Corner, called, I think is it Michelle's Madness or Wiki's Rants? We've played around with these two. What is it, Michelle?
I thought we were going with Wiki's Rants.
We've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm very moody. Who knows what we're doing?
So I'm going to give you a very sneak peek of this podcast. This is, I think we're up to episode 2, about to go live. There you go. There's the link. Have a listen on your way home or on the train or in the car this afternoon. Sneak peek, and then I will hand it over to Michelle to bring us the raw, unfiltered reality of how competency assessments are actually happening on the ground. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Capability Corner.
I'm super excited to be here. Destination unknown at the moment, which I'm very excited about.
It's the podcast where we explore the latest trends, challenges.
Your triangulation is being checked. So that's what I'm hearing at the moment.
What consequence is it having on our quality indicators?
And ideas shaping workforce capability in healthcare.
A big element of capability is self-awareness.
This is the glue that holds everything together. We bring you real conversations.
People still ask you to have a look at this rash, inside their pants, and you're like, oh.
Because you were a sexual health nurse practitioner.
Sure,
but just a background for those that are wondering. We'll add in some personal reflections, relevant industry updates, insights.
Data is everywhere. Do not collect any more.
Controversial,
Perfect.
Karen.
And just look at the things that matter.
One of the magics of healthcare is that combination between the healthcare provider and that person receiving the care.
This is the podcast for those of you that work in education, workforce development, and are implementing system-level healthcare initiatives. All
beautiful.
right. Take it away, Michelle.
Oh, geez, it's such a build-up, Zoe. Anyway, look, I'm going to take a slightly softer approach. I know you just pumped me up to really give it to you. Oh, and look, I've even got it's a dog's breakfast on the screen. But really, I guess what I want to talk about, and we'll talk about this with some customers the other day around competency and what we have to do and how we're going to do it, and then what do they really mean by it. But what I wanted to touch on, and what I've touched on, I'll admit it before, is just how are we running competency assessments in our organisations and with people on the floor. And really what I'm seeing mostly is we say, oh, who's the senior RN or who's the highest RN in this moment? And now they have every right and ability and capability to then run competency assessments on the floor for everyone else. And I know that we can say, all right, well, how hard is hand washing? Surely someone can watch you wash your hands, and that's demonstrating competence. But, you know, when we really get down to the purity of a competency assessment and where they came from and the ASQA foundations of them and the 4 principles of assessment being fairness, flexibility, validity, and reliability, I guess I really just want to point out and reflect upon this concept that for a lot of our staff who aren't experienced, who haven't been tested or assessed in these ways, and who we do really want to be performing and expressing their best in terms of competence on what can be really risk-related activities or skills, we actually do owe it to them to make sure that the person that's doing the assessment is aware of those elements of competency assessment. Not only have they been taught them, but they hold them intrinsic to how they run a competency assessment. And those 4 principles are really important. They're important for the learner, the person trying to demonstrate competence, and they're important for the person who's assessing competence. So I know it's, you know, really easy to say, oh, we'll just get the nurses to assess you, but like, let's not diminish what the role of assessment is and the rights of the learner or the staff member to be assessed, you know, fairly, you know, in those ways. I would really encourage organisations to invest in training. Now, I, for one, think, and this will be recorded, so it's a terrible thing to say, but I actually think the certificate for in workplace training assessment is a bloody bore. Yeah, I did change my wording from the F that I started to pronounce. It is so tedious and long and beyond ridiculous. But there are some units of competency within that certificate that you could pull out or tease out and have your people just do those ones. So the participate in assessment validation, the assess competence units, those would be really helpful. They're still going to help that assessor do or adhere to the 4 principles and then run their assessments in a way that is fair and equitable for their learners. So I encourage you to push your organisations to make sure that your assessors actually are assessors, that they have learned and been trained in the right way. And that doesn't mean sending everyone off for Cert 4s, but it does mean thinking about how you can find that balance between what we really do have rights for and needs for, and what we can afford in terms of training up assessors to do it in the right way possible. Zoe, that's it. Otherwise, I'll just keep going forever. And I'm sure you've timed me and you're going to make fun of me later about how long I went for. So that's it. You can move on.
No, you can have longer, Michelle. It's okay. Michelle.
Whenever I take longer, then you say I take too long, and then you recap me anyway and still tell me that I took too long.
Let's just remember, Michelle went over once. You went over by about 10 minutes once, and now you think I'm the watch, please.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to put this slide on the slide and ask you to say, Michelle, do you think this sums up the big challenges that we have in competency assessment currently?
We're not allowed to have me on screen while I'm looking really close at the screen, but
oh, she's gone off screen. Okay. Well, no, there she's back. She's back.
Back while I was right up there. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Laura. I think it is absolutely a conundrum. It's so frustrating, and to be perfectly honest, we're about to, you know, like the Commission isn't an RTO. They aren't embedded in ASQA regulations. They are using the word competency, which is actually a really controlled, regulated word, and we're applying it in this uncontrolled, unregulated fashion. And we're all going, how do we do this? What are we doing it for? And yeah, like conundrum is right. It is really complicated, and it's a little bit scary, to be honest, about what we're going to be held to and how we should roll it out.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's same there's very similar language a little bit further up in standard 2 that, you know, all organisations must have an effective training system in place and regularly review it to make sure that it's performant. So it's like very clear, you must do this, but then how and why and what's effective and how often do I need to review it? So I think, you know, I can feel and know that there is still confusion around what is expected. Only time will tell, but we are all in the same boat where we're trying to figure out, you know, what exactly that might mean. If it makes you feel better, Donna Wright agrees. We're running a little bit behind time. So what I'm going to do is actually place this link in the chat for you to have a look at and have a giggle. It is honestly funny. This is Donna Wright. And as you've heard me say, I think she really is, she makes me laugh. She's a bit of a guru in mandatory training and competency models. She's funny. We actually recorded this at an AusMed conference, so way back in the day when we ran conferences, and I think she sums it up. Like, how many competencies do we need to do? You know, why are we just standing there and checking people off? So we won't play the video. I think we can agree there are some challenges and still uncertainty around what it means, and have a giggle when you watch this video. Instead, we are going to hand over to Karen to show us, you know, what does best practice look like? Even if there's still a little bit of uncertainty with what we might be required to do, forget about the regulation and what you have to do. What does really good look like? And if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear Karen always thinks about things at a system level. She brings a fabulous viewpoint. And so if we think big and we understand what best practice looks like, we can start to put those little pieces of the puzzle together within our own context to help us get there. So I'm going to hand over to Karen. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Zoe. And it's always lovely to follow on from Michelle as well. So thank you. And just acknowledging everyone who's joined today. And as Zoe said from the beginning, that, you know, you guys, it's a hectic time of the year. We've had lots of celebrations of nurses and midwives and mothers, but it is, you know, the rubber's hitting the road. And I think one of the things that you know, came to me from listening to what the girls have been saying is around, you know, competency-based education probably brings up all sorts of nightmares to those who've been involved in education and workforce development. In one, as Zoe had said, there isn't actually necessarily a definition that everybody works by. But I think the confidence that it gives me is that it is strengthened to the aged care standards adopting an outcome focus. So if we look from there in regard to thinking around, you know, what is the goal of the standards? And the goal is to deliver safe, quality, effective, person-centered care where the individual has confidence in their care provider, where the aged care workforce feels empowered to do their job, and where the governing body is invested in promoting a culture of safety and quality and monitoring for improvement. So it's not all sitting on your shoulders is probably the most important message I want to leave there. So when thinking around what is effective competency-based education, it's part of a broader training, or I prefer the term capability system. So the intention is to learn from what's happened, learn from each other, lived experience, and learn for improving the future. So it's about being proactive, practical, and purposeful. So if you're looking for the rules aren't clear. It is about aligning with the governance structures that you have and may need to improve, embedding in a culture of safety and inclusion, and continuously evolving in response to real world care, which means that's your context. So each one of you will have a different context. So as far as being a best practice, it is about acknowledging that what is relevant to the people and the context of your organization. So sorry about that. So the next slide. So the intent of the standards is to assure there is competency-based education on the core matters, which I'm sure you will agree with me that they are the essential skills and behaviours that the aged care workforce must have in order to assure quality care and outcomes. Doesn't mean they're the only ones you have to do, but they are the core. And having that as your core does give you a nice playing field to work with. So in adopting a workforce approach, it's also assuring that there's a shared knowledge and skills and attitudes, knowing the diversity of the aged care workforce, that it improves the consistency and reliability of the care experience and the quality of care. So the standards are wanting assurance, evidence, proof to show or demonstrate learning outcomes are related to the 5 core matters listed in Standard 2. And they're not looking for an attendance record or a checkbox. An auditor will be collecting evidence from multiple sources and perspectives, from staff, manager, individual, governing boards, and via documents and records. So that comes back to the triangulation that Zoe mentioned. So from the literature on the next slide, what we found is that how you apply best practice will vary, which is probably what if you've looked at the literature as well, you've said, well, no one's telling me what to do. What is important that your governing board and staff have a plan and are monitoring, reviewing, and making improvements. As we talked from the very first series from there, it was about having a plan and continuously improving. So the things we've got there is about risk-aligned competencies. So not every aged care service is the same. Not every worker needs the same support within their competency. Providers must provide their aged care workers with training and supervision that enables them to effectively perform and deliver what matters most for each of their roles. So that again is around taking a risk-based approach and a risk-aligned competencies and having the evidence to support, and using those 5 core areas that matter is a great place to start. As Zoe was mentioning about flexible verification methods, so verification, a process of confirming a worker's ability to demonstrate the required competency safely and effectively through appropriate methods. So as far as verification, the evidence supports that it should be employee-centered where possible. So this allows staff to choose from a range of methods that best suit their roles and learning styles. So again, this recognises that the aged care workforce is diverse. This includes education and training. Some come from a university training, some from a vet centre, and others from other individual training organisations. And there's also a range of cultural, literacy and language backgrounds. So taking a flexible verification approach fosters ownership, empowerment and shared accountability. So when you look at the video, so Donna Wright, she identified 11 categories of verification methods. So those categories including through using the method of testing, of return demonstration, so that's space-based, evidence within the daily work, so having a portfolio, case studies, exemplars, peer review and peer feedback, a self-assessment, discussion or engagement in reflection groups, a presentation to peers or to the others, a mock events or engaging in a survey, and quality monitors. So again, this allows you the flexibility to design a strategy that meets your workforce's needs and your work context. The other enablers within best practice is having a digital system. So this obviously helps you as a human, you can't see and hear everything, allows you to track completion, overdue assessments and progress over time. It enables you to engage your governing board and ensuring that they have the evidence that they require to be able to have confidence that their staff are well equipped, but also for you to identify areas that may need targeted strategies. And it can have some automated recording, reminders and reporting. The inclusive delivery, as we talked about before, they provide supports for staff with low literacy or English proficiency. And there's some great evidence around using visual learning tools, which are as effective as using other mechanisms. So I suppose what I'm not trying to enforce here is that people in having different tools, the assessment still needs to be a competency-based assessment against the agreed standard. It's how you assess and how you enable the learner to be the most engaged within that process, so you can feel the most confident that they will repeat that skill when you're not there as well. So using other tools that give you the feedback as an assessor or as a person engaging in a competency that you can express and demonstrate your competency is really important. Using community language, so maybe changing the language rather than a professional or educational language, a community language, or translated tools. Using buddy systems, so it's a peer-to-peer learning process, and also a hands-on coaching approaches. And finally, around data integration. So obviously linking with training, performance reviews, incidents, and quality data. This gives you the rich information for you to be able to get the intelligence that what you're doing around competency-based education is effective. So finally, this diagram just outlines the two essential pillars for designing and implementing effective workforce capability systems that are underpinned by competency-based education in aged care. So effective governance assures compliance and continuous improvement. Effective governance is one of the cornerstones of our outcome. And inclusive practices are the processes. So it's about being adaptive to the diverse learner needs and outcomes. So an effective system appreciates the independency or the duality of this relationship. A successful programs are found to have blended compliance-focused governance, so that's risk-based competency assessments aligned to the standards, with inclusive pedagogy. So co-designing, personalising teaching and assessment processes and workplace embedded learning. So your approach does not have to be perfect. It needs to meet the standards, be practical in your context, and demonstrate that it's set up for continuous improvement. So what we've got here, where are we up to? I think I've jumped forward from here. Sorry about that. So there's many ways you can assure and demonstrate your competency-based education is effective. What matters is that you're listening and drawing on the experience of individuals in your care. So these are all laid out in the standard as well, that you're monitoring and reviewing the safety and quality data, so with your system in place, that your performance and feedback systems and dashboards can give you the assurance that your workforce feel equipped, so those feedback loops, and are empowered to do their job well, individually and collectively. And again, as a system that you're listening. And then ultimately you're achieving the quality outcomes with a plan for continuous improvement. So just coming to our last slide. So we have put in the L&D toolbox some examples of 2 case studies. And the idea of these are just practical examples that show how you can make meaningful change is possible, regardless of the size or the budget of your organisation, and just assuring that it's built in the framework of continuous improvement. And that is what the standards are looking for, and that is the essence of quality. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate your input as always. And I am, embracing and really, trying to think about each of these elements of the standards in terms of what that system is calling for us to do. So really wise words there, and we will make sure that you get the recording link as soon as possible, because there's so much value in what Karen says. I know little gold nuggets here and there that it's really nice to come back to and synthesize further. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Emma Piercy. She's our Learning Innovation Lead at AusMed. She spent a lot of time over the past 12 months focusing on competency assessments, what is best practice, and coordinating the development of competency assessment templates on the core matters. So I am very excited to introduce you to Emma Piercy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Right, lovely to join this webinar. I think this is one of my first, so thank you all for joining, and thank you so much to Karen, Michelle and Zoe. You've all been fabulous so far. So let me jump straight in. So we have covered the foundations of competency assessments, why they're so important, and where we need to go to improve the systems surrounding them. So what I'm really excited to share with you all is that AusMed Competency Beta is now available for AusMed customers. And I'm hoping this will answer some of the questions that have been popping up in the chat throughout this webinar. But please do add more as this continues on. So to give you a bit of context, over the past year, we've been working very hard to understand what best practice competency assessment really looks like. And that's drawing on the work of industry leaders like Donna Wright, as we mentioned earlier, and more importantly, learning directly from organisations like your own. So what we've been hearing loud and clear is a couple of things that we touched on. Writing competencies takes a lot of time and resources. Templates vary from job roles and scopes that we have to factor in, and most systems are still paper-based or manual, which makes it really hard to track progress, decipher old or new versions, and maintain consistency essentially across the board. Then you add in 2.9.6, which is figuring out how to incorporate soft skill topics into this mix, which adds in another degree of complexity that we need to figure out. So what have we done? We've built something that reflects what we think great looks like, but making it scalable. So with expert panels, strong governance, and experienced subject matter experts behind every single template, we've created high quality editable assessments tailored to different job roles and scope of practice. This will hopefully help you save time, reduce duplication in work, and ensure consistency without compromising on quality. So some examples of available templates that we have at the moment are SIRS, recognising the rights of the individual, adhering to code of conduct for aged care, assisting with medication, observing skin integrity, and much more. So we've got a bit of a list going on at the moment, and all of these templates are linked to the relevant education that we hold in the AusMed library. Something really important as well is that we wanted to make sure they're customizable to suit your organization's policies and processes. We know, again, it's not one size fits all. So that's an element that's incredibly important. And furthermore, we wanted to map these to the job roles, care settings, and the aged care quality standards so that you feel really confident that the competencies that you'll be using are going to meet all of the criteria that we've spoken about earlier in this webinar. Now, that list I just spoke through is just the beginning. There are plenty more templates on the way, and we hope to have an extremely comprehensive list come 1st of July and ongoing from there. So, in our research, we found that while most organizations rely on the education and wonderful governance teams to develop competencies, those teams are often stretched quite thin. You're doing your best, but sometimes you don't have the time or resources or access to the latest evidence to create consistent, high quality assessments, which maybe that sounds familiar, maybe it doesn't. But hopefully with what we're able to provide with AusMed Competency, we wanted to not just support those existing processes, but enhance them. So we designed a system to essentially simulate what great internal workflows look like, great internal governance workflows look like, and then added rigor at every single step. So to do that, we essentially created an expert panel, and they come into every single assessment and review every single assessment. So within that, we have 3 people on that panel. First is our healthcare competency and learning specialist, who brings hands-on experience, writing competencies, and a deep knowledge of the aged care sector. They have a wealth of experience and understandings, and they make sure everything is really practical and relevant to real roles. Because whilst we want to ensure that we are meeting all of the, ASQA and RTO guidelines of assessments, we want to make sure that you also feel like they really fit the needs of your organizations in day-to-day practice. Secondly, we have an academic integrity specialist who has a background in RTO land, and they ensure that each assessment holds up educationally. So it's not just checking a box, but actually driving professional development. Is it fair, relevant, non-biased? Is every assessment going to be consistent across the board? And how do we ensure that with the wording we use, making sure that it's applicable to all diverse range of assessors and candidates? And finally, we have a clinical governance specialist who reviews each and every assessment to make sure it meets current regulations, aligns with best practice, and essentially avoids introducing any risk. So our aim is to build content with care, review it, and then ensure that real expertise is behind every single assessment. So what have we learned along the way and then implemented into the writing process alongside this panel that you can directly benefit from? So there's a couple best practice strategies for writing fair, practical assessments. One is that we have tailored to the role and audience. Each assessment is aligned to real-world tasks, scope of practice, and experience level of the person being assessed. Like we've spoken about, one size fits all does not work in this situation. And so we want to make sure that each assessment is accessible, inclusive, and relevant to the job and person. Secondly, we wanted to use extremely clear and observable criteria. So defining what success looks like in action, avoiding vague terms and focusing actually on what can be seen, heard, or measured. Because as we know, this is a demonstration and verification process more than just knowledge consumption. So basing assessments on the knowledge, skills, and behaviors that align with regulatory and clinical expectations. We also wanted to offer assessment flexibility. So much to what Karen was just describing, there's more than one way to verify competence. And that's really specific to the topic. The way you're going to determine competence in hand hygiene is going to be very different to how you determine competence in SIRS, for example. So they call for different methods. You could use a simulation for a high-risk task, maybe an in-person observation for routine care, and then verbal assessments for evaluating your soft skills or decision-making, or perhaps where written responses may be a barrier. So, for example, someone with a lower literacy or language proficiency. And then we also want to make sure that we're covering the knowledge, skills, and behaviours. So each assessment should cover knowledge, what do they understand, skills, what do they need to do or have done, and behaviours, how do they need to act. And finally, we have embedded governance and integrity. So all templates are reviewed by clinical and educational experts to ensure the fairness, quality, and compliance. And these are standardized templates and structured processes to help embed that consistency across your organization. So you know that if one person is competent in something, that you know the next person also is. So that brings us to our piece where the templates are available. Essentially, the AusMed Competency gives organisations early access to a growing library, like I mentioned, of editable competency assessment templates. These have been specifically designed to help you get ahead of those standards, and particularly with 2.9.6, with those 5 core matters that come into effect on the 1st of July. So that was a really key piece for us. Eventually, these templates will form a broader competency management system, but for now, the beta gives you a head start and it helps you stay proactive with compliance and staff capability, if you will. So with the QR code on the screen, if you'd like to access the templates, please scan the QR code there. It will take you to a short request form. Now, this is available for AusMed customers, so I believe Learn or Library LMS. So that will take you to your org portal login, and then it will take you to a request form. Once you've submitted that, our wonderful customer experience team headed up by Michelle will review the eligibility and approve access depending on that criteria. And we can provide all of this post this webinar as well if you need any more links. I've hopefully given you enough time to scan. All right, final note from me. So what is ahead? There is more. Like we mentioned, there's a content piece, but there's also a systems piece here. We haven't solved every piece of the puzzle yet with this content because most of this is paper-based, and that can be hard too. So there is so much more to come. Currently, we are developing a digital solution to streamline how you manage the competency and capabilities of your organization. So again, throughout the research period, we've heard challenges, which is paper-based systems slow teams down. There's limited to no oversight of workforce capability. Who's competent in what? Can you pull that up? It's really hard. And then difficulty linking assessment, learning, and compliance all together. So what we're doing is streamlining the digital system to track and record all of this. We want to provide visibility across your teams and services so you have that global oversight of your organization's, like I said, competence and then therefore capabilities. And what we want to do is that will be seamlessly integrated with all of our content and learning records. So you can complete a piece of educational content and then therefore verify and demonstrate that knowledge with a competency. So that's what we're currently working on. Stay tuned for more details in the future. For now, we're focused on getting it right and not rushing it. But yeah, thank you very much. With all of that being said, I will hand it back over to Zoe. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma, and thank you everyone for your engagement in the chat. I know this is a very emotive and a really key topic. So anything that we haven't been able to answer, we will get back to you as soon as we can. What I want to leave with are just a couple of quick wins. So what can you do this week, next week, ASAP? 3 things. I think first, start with conducting a competencies review. So this is where your competency matrix comes in. Working out what's needed based on your risk appetite and your service design. What are the competencies that your key job roles require? Second is contact us if you haven't already done so to request access to our templates. Start saving time now, at least on the writing and the development phase. And third tip is, bring your board along, bring your executive team along with this conversation to get that bigger picture system change in place where we can link competence and capability and move beyond thinking this as a checklist. We need to be able to bring our team along with us. So the good news in terms of this webinar series, we're almost there. There are a couple more to go. We've got our June webinar, which is on that exact topic, getting your boards ready for an audit. And then we finish up in, I think it's actually Tuesday, the 1st of July, that is looking at reporting against the new standards and helping you prepare for your first audit. So almost there. Here is the link to register for our next webinar. If you haven't already done so, this will be a really important conversation where we can support you and your executive body to also start thinking about getting ready for an audit. So thank you for your participation. Thank you for engagement in the chat. Have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on the 3rd of June. Have a great day.